Thank you. So I told Aaron, I said, I just wanted to, we're not going to go through all the slides again. I just want to kind of quickly go through because these three lessons, these three chapters are really tied together: anger, outrage, and contempt. So I'd like to get to contempt today and talk about that a little bit. So,
and he's excited about it.
I'm excited about contempt. So you're going to see why. So as we go through, let me click through some technology here. So through the heart of the matter, you know, we talked about anger and do we have the right heart to use anger as our weapon? You know, are we the right hands and have the right training to deal with our anger? Most of the time it's destructive for us. You know, obviously the Yoda quote, fear is the path of the dark side, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. Righteous anger, we talked about righteous anger and what a slim piece of anger that it is, right? In the right hands, with the right training, at the right time, defending the right things. Righteous anger is very surgical, right? In our anger, do not sin. We use this often as a defense for our own anger, but we talk about other verses that, you know, just tell us to refrain from anger. Don't be hot-tempered. Be not quick in your spirit to become angry. Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away. Anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. It came down to what is the real origin of my own anger? Is it my ego defending my territory? Or is it actually righteous anger, something that has its source in the desire for the well-being of all or for the furthering of the kingdom of God? We joked about this with Harold Ramis, right? So my righteous indignation was just a form of entertainment. I enjoyed being indignant. I enjoyed being angry. I liked the feeling of it. I liked how it fueled. He realized that in his own life. And I wanted to get to this. So I listened to a lesson as I was driving. Probably everybody drove for Thanksgiving somewhere in the world. I had a lot of time on the road. And one of the examples I heard from this Amy Carmichael was that it makes our point about being transformed and about what's inside of us. So if we are a cup of water, a cup of sweet water, and we're jolted, right? What comes out of that cup of sweet water? Sweet water, right? If we're jolted more and more comes out, well, what comes out is more sweet water. Bitterness can't come out of a cup of sweet water. So if a sudden jar can cause me to speak an impatient, unloving word, then I know nothing of Calvary love. For a cup brimful of sweet water cannot spill even one drop of bitter water, however suddenly jolted. So what's inside of us when we're jolted by something that makes us angry? You know, blame anything, blame a political party, blame a certain group, blame a TV show, blame social media. What comes out of me when I'm jolted by that? That's the transformative part. That's figuring out what's inside of us and where our heart is in all of this. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And that's scary because, you know, we control ourselves very well. Think about our work situations, right? We know how to control ourselves at work, to project an image. But a lot of times it's those other situations in the car, at home, that we let down that guard. And that those jolts let a lot out that I think speaks more to us than when we're on full alert, when we're controlling everything about us.
Yeah, control takes a lot of effort, right? If we're not transformed from the inside out, maintaining this facade requires a lot of energy. And we expend that energy all day, maybe all week, maybe all month, maybe seasonally, until we get to an event or something happens and I'm jolted, right? What sloshes out of me? It's all this stuff that I've stuffed in, right? All the things that I've stuffed it and I've stuffed it and I've stuffed it. And I can't stand my boss and I can't stand my coworkers and these people drive me crazy and my route to work is filled with orange cones. All this stuff. And we just, we're holding it in. And then all of a sudden, Aaron says one thing to me and, right, what comes out? Not sweet water. So this is about anger, right? And what do we do with it? One question I wanted to ask was, then we'll stop on anger, is what should we not do with our anger? You know, you can Google and you can do scriptures, and I've got several articles. What does the Bible say about anger? What to do with it? I'd be glad to share anything I found, but what should we not do with our anger? Just before we get started. Huh?
Take it out on others.
Don't take it out on others.
Bible says, do not sin.
In your anger, do not sin.
Do not sin.
Mhm.
Covers a lot.
It's difficult, because if you're in that moment, but I think that there's a lot of really bad things that have happened, like even murders that have been in the heat of anger, that normally they wouldn't even dream of doing it.
Right, exactly right. Or does anybody have any other thoughts about this topic, right? And what we do with this? Because anger is going to lead us to outrage here in a minute.
Assuming we all have a good anger story. Not that we want to, but this is realistic, right? It's not just Terry and I.
Yeah.
But I feel like, I have to be on all the time at work. I'm just in that, and so I'm on. When I'm out and about, I'm on all the time. When I get home, I'm not on. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And I don't necessarily spew over, but, I just like, I'm not on.
He's being really quiet right now. I don't know.
Ronnie, could you elaborate on that?
We're gonna talk later. We're gonna talk later, apparently. So, okay. So, I think this is a transition to outrage, right? This anger. What we do with this anger, one direction is outrage. And so we actually, because of Alan's question, I wanted to make sure. I was thinking of outrage as kind of an outward expression of my anger. Right? When I talked about outrage, when I looked at this lesson, I found another definition for purposes of the book that we're going to reference today. We define outrage for our purposes as talk designed to provoke emotional responses in an audience, anger, fear, or moral indignation, for instance, through the use of overgeneralizations, sensationalism, inaccurate information, and ad hominem attacks. So this lesson is, Jesus was serious when then we will not contribute to our outrage culture. So we're going to talk about our contribution to the outrage culture.
Yeah, so I think we started this last week.
We
did.
touched on it.
Yeah, so when did this become an identifying characteristic of Christianity, right? We've got the fruit of the Spirit up there, but also we threw in the banana being outrage, right? It seems like our entire culture loves a little outrage right now. And the church is a part of that. We're playing along just like everybody else is. We've somehow gone along, adapted their process, or maybe they've adapted to ours. I don't know, but that outrage is there. And if, again, if you don't believe us, like we said here, look at Facebook, look at some of the blogs. I mean, just start reading the comments and you can immediately see the outrage, the frustration, the finger pointing, and it's everyone. It's everyone.
So this is what our anger could turn into, right? Outrage. I'm poking people, I'm mad, I'm kind of Godzilla stomping through an emotional minefield, right? With my family, with my friends, with my coworkers. We used to have a boss that everybody would kind of look at each other like, it's today, what's today? Right? We had I think we had like a sign or something. I think we had a picture at the front desk. We would turn it upside down or right side up. Like everybody knew, like, whoop, today's not the day. Picture's upside down, right? Because you didn't want to walk into the outrage buzzsaw.
And there's so much of life like this right now, right? We avoid situations because we know what's coming. And that's not good.
Yeah, so we might not engage because we're afraid of what outrage we might be on the receiving end, right?
I think part of it maybe has to do with forgiveness, because it seems like our society in general is kind of moving towards not especially not the kind of forgiveness of God that talks about forgiving enemies and things like that. No matter what happens, and if I trip on a crack on the sidewalk out here, well, somebody's going to pay for that. It's not, well, we need to fire the person in charge of the parking lot, and we need to sue the church for, and yeah. But I think, and you see that, I think you can, maybe it's just me, but I think in society in general, nobody wants to forgive anybody for anything. It's an immediate, well, here's why we are outraged about it, and here's why we want this, we want that, and that person is, well, you know, that term now, canceled, whatever. You're pretty much, let's just destroy this person because they're, whereas God's view of that is way different, especially if you talk about forgiving your enemies and the way that they're treated. I think that's part of the problem, is we're conditioned that, oh, you know, you were wrong, so let's get outraged and destroy whoever or whatever caused you the problem.
Right, right. And you're making a great point. I mean, are we being influenced by the culture, or are we influencing the culture? Am I being transformed? Am I helping to transform those around me? Or am I just being, you know, a reflection of what the culture is?
Yes.
So, okay.
I was gonna say, yeah, I mean, all of this comes back down to forgiveness or reconciliation, and the reconciliation is discussed in the same passage that we're talking about here. You know, it's therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar and there, remember that your brother has something against you. Yeah, just stoke it,
Right.
or just ignore it. But that's not what he's telling us to do, is that we're supposed to leave the gift and go and be reconciled to our brother. But, you know, if we as Christians were the example of the forgiveness and the reconciliation, boy, would that change the world? But right now, it seems that we're on the front lines of this as well.
Okay, so did you know?
I think it kind of ties in with self-control. Also, I'm wondering if we're becoming of people who need that intense emotional rush. And or a
Outrage
rush of
junkies.
any kind. I mean, we have so many problems with drugs and alcohol in our world, but there's other ways to get that rush. You know, I mean, there's some people that do skydiving, and yet maybe anger is our sort of our rush. It's kind of like that guy said last week. Didn't you have a thing of a guy that said he realized he was enjoying being angry?
Yeah, just
And
recreational.
And at first I thought, but the more I thought about it, it's the rush that comes with it, that intense, we have to have everything so intense anymore.
Okay.
I don't know if some of the video games, they're just,
Yeah, so alcohol isn't our adrenaline rush, it's anger.
right.
Yeah.
I think that's where what people are using it for.
Yeah.
I don't think they realize it, maybe, but it's making them feel something, so
Right.
they're.
It absolutely is.
Yeah, so we're outrage junkies.
I can see that.
We could have recreational anger and we're outrage junkies. I'm just gonna leave it on this channel and get me fired up. And I mean, you've had people probably tell you like, yeah, I don't listen to news anymore because it just gets me fired up. Maybe you've done that. So no, can't listen to this anymore. It gets me worked up. Not that we're ignoring the issues of the world. That's not it at all. But just, man, the way this is presented, it's so inflammatory. So there are 13 types of outrage. I didn't know this. So I'm not going to go through them all. I'm by far not an expert, but there's some on here on this list I think stand out. The top four are listed in parentheses: mockery, sarcasm, misrepresentative exaggeration. So that time 3 times really quickly. Insulting language, name calling. I love this cartoon. What are you outraged by now? They haven't told me yet. Right?
But we're just ready.
But we're just ready.
We're ready.
We're ready to be outraged about something.
And when you look at this list, how many of these have you done this week? Although you may have to define a few.
I don't know all these, no,
Yeah.
but I can guess at belittling or extreme language or name calling or emotional display, emotional language, character assassination,
That's right.
right? Mockery, sarcasm. I got that one down. Verbal sparring and fighting, I had an asterisk because that's the one that is most direct. So that one actually can lead to some productive resolution, but it's also near the bottom of the list. We don't want to engage. When I'm outraged, I don't want to engage. I don't want to resolve this. I don't want something better to come of this. I just want to be outraged. I just want to be.
But when we think of our culture and outrage, how often is this now seeping into our families and we're seeing more and more griping at each other because that's what happens in the world? Are we at more peace in our families now than we've ever been? The answer is no. This may be really impacting our families more than we anticipate. And that's not good either. Because, I think in general, we're just talking about, some of this is about cultural outrage and how we react with the world. But a lot of the things that we interact with the world on eventually come to live in us and our families. And that's not good.
And you're really not gonna like the next slide. Does anybody have any comments before we go on to the next slide? So maybe you're thinking, yeah, I know what you're talking about, this outrage thing. I don't have this. This is not me. It's not my problem. I don't do any of this. You know, look at your own words and actions. But this one caught me from, this is a book called The Outrage Industry. It's a good reference. I think it's where I got the 13 types of outrage. The worst individual offenders come from both the left and the right. Is one side really worse than the other? In a word, yes. Our data indicate that the right uses decidedly more outrage speech than the left. Taken as a whole, liberal content is quite nasty in character, following the outrage model with accusations, conspiracy theories, and ridicule. But conservatives, however, are even nasty. They did all this research from like 10 years of videos and posts and all this stuff. And it's, you love it. It's a lot of nerd data. Right? They're pointing at us, conservatives. Right? We realize that the other side's really, really bad. We would all agree with that. But they're kind of pointing back at us. We kind of fall to this list. So sorry for the bad news. But this is not just a cultural problem. This is in our building, it's in our congregation, it's in our families, it's in our homes.
So what do we do with this? That's really the next question. What do we do with this? We just live through it?
Really, they are really.
It's a good thing you're excited about this stuff.
I'm excited about this. These are very relevant things to talk about, right? Maybe that's why everybody's quiet. I see myself in this. But like we've talked about, I mean, this is the place. Let's discuss it. All right, let's figure it out. Let's bring it out in the open and do something with it. Dean has some wisdom.
First thing to do is decide was God, was Jesus, were they really serious about what they're saying about anger?
Mm-hmm.
And two is understand what they're really saying. And I think there's the one that we have to be understanding of it that says, don't sin in your anger, because obviously there are times apparently where we can be angry about something, but I think it's the way we do it. But for church, for Christians or just godly people, I think we really do need to think about how do we act, how are we getting angry, how often are we getting angry? We can't just leave here and say, hey, we talked about anger today, and then jump down somebody's throat. We have situations like that happen in the church all the time, where somebody is upset about something, and instead of coming to calmly discuss about what we can do to fix it, they come and dump all their stuff and then walk away. And then that's hard for you to deal with.
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, you guys as elders, right, as leaders of the church, probably are exposed to a lot more of this, because we're all nice to each other. Everybody's really nice in class, and we says hi and shake our hands, and I'm doing great, how you doing? Wearing a clean shirt today, right? But you guys probably get like the close the door and bam, both barrels.
I was gonna say, I'm not gonna say I've never been outraged. Everybody has, I'm sure, at some point or other. I hope it's not very often, but the thing that bothers me so much is when you become outraged at what you think is justifiably something stupid and crazy, and why is this happening? The thing that bothers me the most is, what are you gonna do about it?
Right.
You can't do anything about it usually. So you're stymied, you're neutered, whatever you want to call it. You can't do a thing about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes on and on and on. And that's what's so outrageous to me.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, that's a great point, right? You feel helpless in the
Totally
situation.
helpless.
Yeah.
Nobody cares.
Right.
what are you gonna do?
Mhm.
But a lot of times we're most outrageous about the things we can't do anything about.
And it seems though, a lot of times that you should be able to do something, what you're thinking you should do about it. Nobody else cares or nobody else wants to go along with you. You know, it's just,
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
That's one of those things, that leads us to, what was it called? Projective aggressive anger. So I'm mad, I'm outraged, and I want you to be mad about this. Why aren't you mad about this? I'm gonna try to get you worked up because I'm worked up. That's not very healthy. You ready for the next one?
Sure,
Okay,
'cause I know you're excited.
really.
living excited.
He does, he does. So here's a maybe, a what if scenario. What if one of the reasons why we're so into anger right now and outrage is because we're going through a grief cycle? We are grieving our loss of cultural significance as the church in America. And as a part of that grief, we're in the second stage of grief, anger. Could this be why we as a church are so angry?
It's a reasonable,
Right, and you wonder if we're angry in the church? I mean, you look at, you can go to a lot of churches of Christ, for example, and they'll tell you what they don't like about every other church of Christ in town. Does that not sound like anger and frustration? Yeah, and this is from Randy Harris. He's I guess a professor and travels a ton. He says, I travel a lot. I meet a lot of Christians, and I have to tell you that as a group, we are some of the angriest people I know. And if you ask me what Christians are angry about, the answer is yes. We're angry in principle, right? Jesus says murder begins with anger. Congratulations on not killing anybody, but how are you doing with your anger? So we are angry about something, right? But what if it's about grief?
I'm watching this cycle here. We're in the second stage of anger. The end is acceptance. I don't want to accept cultural significance, the loss of that. I'm not looking to that. Still in the stage of can be fixed.
Mhm.
What can we do to solve this? What can we change? I don't want to simply get angry and depressed and then bargaining with it or whatever it says, and then accepting it.
But I want to change it.
Yeah.
But it really depends on what do we mean by this loss of cultural significance, right? Part of it is because we as Christians have screwed up. We have made it so that we are not relevant in a lot of cases. How do you bring back the love and the kindness? Again,
Change it somewhere.
it should change I mean, staying in anger and yelling back at the world is not going to help. We have to change something, or else, yes, this will continue, and it will continue to become less culturally significant.
Maybe we need to be a better example of how to deal with anger and outrage.
Absolutely. If we weren't the ones screaming back at them every time something went wrong, how would they continue yelling at us? I mean, it's hard to have a fight when only one person's fighting.
True.
But we're in a fight.
I think it's marinating.
It is very.
Okay. Should we go on?
We should go on, 'cause this is your favorite part.
Okay, I wanted to get to contempt. That's kind of why we're going through anger and outrage, because I think this is a really interesting tie-in, because what happens beyond anger, beyond rage, when I'm just tired, when I've had enough, when I've expressed my frustration so many times and stuff's not changing, it turns into contempt, right? See, I love this chart, right? The degree of hate. It's annoyance, anger, rage, and then contempt. And this is the reference that we have in Matthew 5. Let me get back to that. Matthew 5, I think it's 22.
22, yep.
Which says, getting there, sorry. You have heard that it was said, starting in 21, to the people long ago, you shall not murder. Anyone who murders shall be subject to judgment. I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raka, is answerable to the court. And anyone who says, you fool, will be in dangers of the fire of hell. Raka, I learned this morning, it's a fairly insulting term. I don't know if anybody else knows this. but it's intended to mimic like clearing your throat. Right? Just contempt, just disgust.
Not very good at clearing.
Sorry, I'm not. I didn't want to take any chances while I was up here. But it could also be things like dismissive or disregard or disrespect or malice or neglect or disgust or detest or holding a grudge or ignoring. Right? This is contempt. This is what they're talking about here, this raka. Right? If you say to your brother or sister, like, oh, I'm done with you. Right? I'm going to ignore you. I'm going to set you aside. I'm not going to engage with you anymore. I'm going to change our relationship. We've talked in the past about our relationships go from warm to cool. Well, I'm going to cool this relationship because I've had enough. You're not doing what I want. You're not who I want you to be. You disagree, whatever the reason is, right? I'm going to change this relationship.
Remember,
That's contempt.
yeah, the ultimate goal here is reconciliation. So if you're to the point of, I'm done with you, the chance of reconciliation is nil. I mean, you can see the progression here. And that's the danger.
So does anybody see this kind of, the contempt that we're talking about? Kind of that feeling.
I think at some point you just give up.
At some point you give up.
It's done, right?
Right. And then, yeah, you're just done, right? I'm exhausted. I've had enough. I've expended all my outrage.
You know what, when I look at it, I look at, we have to hold ourselves accountable. It really just comes down to being accountable, because we will blame everybody else for what is wrong. But really, it's probably my mistake, it was probably whatever, but and like you said, someone trips on the sidewalk, and blame someone else, well, I didn't pick up either.
Right, exactly.
We have to hold ourselves accountable. And I think it's hard because then I have to look at myself, and that's painful.
Right.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes you have to just really look at yourself instead of keep pointing the finger at everybody else, but that's easy to do.
Yeah.
The only person I can really change is myself.
Right.
So I think we just have to look inward at ourselves, hold ourselves accountable, be the example. But I think we have to continue to fight. If it's something we're fighting for, we can't get contempt, we can't get complacent. You know, we need to still struggle for what's right. But it gets exhausting when you just give up.
Holding ourselves accountable. I'll tell you a humorous story. So when someone gets injured at work, there's essentially two first questions. One, was your phone in your hand? They say no. Second question, when we watched the video, was the phone in your hand? Because everything's on camera. It is amazing how often those, you phrase it that way, different answers, you get the different answer. You watch the video, and yes, they tripped over the pallet because they had the phone in their hand. They tripped over the curb because they had their phone in their hand. Again, accountability, right? We're so ready to blame someone else. How often do we stop and really address what's in us?
So what you're saying is some of the screen time that we have, that screen should be a mirror. Right? We should have God's word as a reflection of who we should be and figure out, how am I doing? My own accountability.
That's scary.
It is scary.
We don't like that.
I don't like it at all.
Because what if we are the problem? That means then we have to make a change. And that's low on our list to do as well.
So the tagline for this chapter is, if Jesus was serious, then we will recognize every person as valuable. Right? And contempt devalues someone. Just plain and simple. One of the scripture references for this chapter was Luke chapter 6, verses 37 and 38. And I didn't understand it when I first kind of got this reference, but as you read it, see if this makes sense of why this is in the contempt chapter. Do not judge and you will not be judged. Do not condemn and you will not be condemned. Forgive and you will be forgiven. Give and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. How do we treat other people? That's the way that it will be measured back to us. That'll be the standard. So is it contempt? Is that the way that I treat people? Does that reflect well on me if I do that? If I dismiss people, if I devalue people? How do I feel when I've been devalued? Part of the reason I was excited is a weird word to use, but enthusiastic about talking about this is because this is something I wrestle with, right? I have a tendency, I have to manage this, to hold people in contempt because I've been the recipient of that. And I think that's part of why I'm sensitive to being held contempt against me, is because I have a tendency to do it myself. This is something I have to watch for, and it's very easy to do. And you may not recognize it, but I think a lot of us do. And it may be, situational, maybe seasonal. Oh, I can't talk to him about this because he gets so upset. So I'm marginalizing his perspective or her perspective. So this is all under the guise of contempt.
And every person is valuable. We all glad to point out the people we don't agree with that we can put in those categories, right? It all comes back to, who did Jesus die for? John 3:16, whoever believes in him, that's everyone, regardless of how you feel about them. And can we treat them with the same respect?
So what do we do about this? I messed this slide up, but this is from Romans 12. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. This is what do I do when somebody is on the road to being in contempt in my brain. Rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn, live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, it is mine to avenge, I will repay, says the Lord. And on the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. These are my action steps, right? When I'm feeling like holding somebody in contempt, I need to go back and reference this. Because people are valuable. We are all God's children. We are all God's masterpiece. We are all his workmanship. Just because somebody's doing something that I don't like doesn't give me the right to hold them in contempt. So do I really believe that? Right? Do I really believe that Jesus was serious? Serious enough that I'm going to change my behavior. That I'm going to look at myself and be transformed and decide I'm not going to do this anymore to the best of my ability. I'm going to be led by the Spirit and change who I am.
Yeah. Do you really want to try to show that you believe that Jesus and the Bible is serious? Just do this last half a sentence. Overcome evil with good. That's really difficult. I mean, as soon as someone tries to do anything to us, we'll shoot it right back at them.
Yeah, they started it.
Yeah, not my fault. Right? We're great ping pong or tennis players, right? We can hit that ball back as fast, as hard, with more spin. But yeah, how do we change that?
Apparently we're better at it than conservatives.
Well, yeah, I think we can, because we're self-righteous a lot of times when we shoot that ball back.
That's right. We get a lot of energy because we're stuffing all this stuff. So when it comes at us, we can really give it back.
Yeah. Overcome evil with good.
So I did like this quote. The opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. Heard this before, maybe you agree, maybe you don't. But I think this ties into this idea of contempt. People are valuable. And if I can't love you, then I'm going to be indifferent. There's only two choices, apparently, right? One of my classic movies, right? Breakfast Club. Does anybody know Breakfast Club? And they're having this discussion about, with their parents, how their parents treat them. And, this is teen angst, really, in movie form. And they ask Ali Sheedy's character, they say, well, what do your parents do to you? Well, they ignore me. Right? They're not important. She's not valued by her parents. And so sometimes we feel that way. That's sometimes the way that we get treated, so we treat other people that way. It's indifference. And it's not what we're called to do as Christians. Christians are called to love, not indifference. So the rest of that quote is, the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. The opposite of art is not ugliness, it's indifference. The opposite of faith is not heresy, it's indifference. And the opposite of life is not death, it's indifference. You may agree or disagree with this, but it's an interesting way to think about it. If indifference is one of the worst things that we can do, as kind of evidenced by this, it makes it pretty serious. If love is everything we can do, then indifference is everything we're not doing, everything we're withholding, the contempt that we have.
And where are we in our daily lives withholding something? How is that impacting? You want to wonder why the fights continue, right? What is one side withholding from the other? Where do we start with the reconciliation? This is a tough lesson.
It is very tough, but I think all three of these tie together. Anger, outrage leads to contempt. So we're probably all in here somewhere along this spectrum, right? Maybe in different relationships in our lives, or in different places, maybe in different situations, maybe in different environments. We're in here somewhere. I'm heavy on the contempt side, so thanks for letting me teach this lesson. Some people maybe still be heavy on the anger side. Some people may be heavy on the outrage side. They're like a powder keg, right? Man, I didn't want to bring this up because they're going to blow up.
Well, I've heard there's three roles of bullying. There's the bully, the victim, and then there's the innocent bystander, right? So this seems to be kind of playing to the third role, right? Which is really a false role, because you're complicit, right? I think that's what you're saying in a very nice way.
Right, yeah. In a nice one.
And again, if the ultimate goal is, as Dean said, forgiveness or reconciliation, you'll never get there through the indifference. And that is what makes this so scary. Where are we leaving, and who are we leaving? And how long ago was it that you left someone in the indifference column?
And what if Jesus was serious? What if he really meant what he said?
Stop your worship. You shouldn't be here in church if there's someone sitting in this category in your life. We just don't do that, right? We just go about our lives, which is, I guess, the next scary part, right? We just go on and we leave people, and they're in the difference category for the rest of our lives.
Okay, thanks for your time. Are there any comments, questions? Anything you want to add? Sprinkle into this before we
I
go?
didn't want to steal your thunder, but
No.
I was reading on this and thought this was really interesting and kind of hit home what Justice Scalia said. The quote he said was, I attack ideas, I don't attack people. Some very good people have some very bad ideas. And if you can't separate the two, you got to get another day job. And I have a real problem with that, people I don't even know, I don't agree with their ideas. It's hard to separate, well, that's just their idea. That's
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do have an issue with that, right? It's very difficult to separate, you have a bad idea, so you're a bad person, right? Or you have bad behavior, so you're a bad Christian. We have a hard time untangling this. That's a great point. So thank you for that.
And thanks for reading it too.
Yeah, thanks for reading. Yay, gold star for the day. Okay, thanks again. Enjoy.